What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Before I get started on the video, just want to let everybody know I will be live tonight on Twitter like I said I was going to do yesterday, but then the big news came out about Joe Judge, so I said, all right, I got to go live on YouTube. We'll push the Twitter thing back a day, but it's something I want to try, start doing it weekly if people really enjoy it. There's going to be a ton to talk about now that we're going to be looking for both a head coach and a general manager. So if you want to talk about that tonight on Twitter, more than welcome to. John Mara, of course, came out today, had his press conference, talking about the issues with this football team, taking a lot of responsibility, a lot of the blame. I'll touch on a couple of the quotes. Definitely showed some humility, definitely took a lot of blame for where this New York Giants team currently is. And I'm going to give John Mara a lot of credit for that. You know, you come on my channel the last couple of years, I've given John Mara a lot of the blame with this football team. Now, have they gone as far as I would like yet? Not quite. I want them to get rid of everybody from within that front office. Now, I fully recognize Chris Mara more than likely is not going to lose his job. He's his brother. He was part of the interview process today with Joe Shane, so that's probably not going to happen. But I want the scouts out of there. I want the general manager to have free reign to be able to pick the staff that he wants to bring in to work underneath him, and then I want the same freedom provided to the head coach that that general manager inevitably brings in. And I do believe in my heart that that is what's going to be what happens. For the first time in a long time, I think John Mara is going to be completely hands-off, and I am going to give him a lot of credit for that if, in fact, that will be the case. And at this point, that's all I can assume that it will be. You know, let's circle back. We all know the issues. 2016, they should have fired Jerry Reese. They didn't do it. They fired Coughlin. They kept Reese. Then you had Jerry Reese, who was trying to save his job, was spent like a lunatic in 2017, which set up the New York Giants to have to blow it all up in 2018, which brought in Dave Gettleman, and we all know that was a complete disaster. We know that the GM search was not thorough at all, and John Mara was looking for a guy that was willing to stick with Eli Manning. I think that's what we all think and assume, and it's also come out in articles as well. John Mara will never admit that, but I really, truly think that that was the case. Reason being, John Mara listened to the fan base. He did. I think he let the fan base influence him. When the fan base revolted about the Eli Manning benching, rightfully so, for Geno Smith, he took it as, I got to give Eli Manning another chance, which wasn't necessarily the way that the fan base felt. They just felt that Eli Manning was disrespected for the benching of Geno Smith. But I do truly believe, and that's my honest opinion, that he went out there and hired Dave Gettleman because he wanted to try to compete and win in 2018. We all know that that was a mistake. Then I thought that he listened to the fan base too much when he fired Pat Shurmur. Listen, if you're going to blow it up and you're going to give a GM and a head coach on the same timeline in 2018, regardless of how bad 2018 went when you started the rebuild in 2019, you probably shouldn't have fired Pat Shurmur the next year. But the fan base wanted Pat Shurmur gone, and he listened. He got rid of him after he drafted a quarterback 1 year in, and I definitely think that that screwed up the upbringing of Daniel Jones. Whether or not Daniel Jones would have been great, we'll never know. But the fact that he's now had to go through 3 coaches in 4 years, 4 offensive play callers in 4 years, is a disaster, and it speaks to the failures of this organization. And the main culprit for that is John Mara. This time around, I think John Mara finally got it right. And yes, was he influenced by the fan base? Probably. But I think the fans got it right this time. I don't think that John Mara had a choice. As he said in his press conference today, he had to blow it up. There's been too much dysfunction with this organization, and if you're going to bring in the best GM possible in a draft in which you have 5 picks inside the top 85, you cannot force Joe Judge on that general manager. Listen, was Joe Judge dealt a fair hand? Absolutely not. When you really look at it, Joe Judge got screwed. Joe Judge took on a team that was manned by Dave Gettleman. In 2018 was a disaster as far as the draft goes. 2019, they started a rebuild. He got handed a quarterback that he was never really a part of in terms of analyzing and drafting and being a big part of that draft. He inherited a poor roster. Yes, they spent in free agency in 2020, and they had a solid draft drafting Andrew Thomas, so on and so forth, but he inherited a really poor situation. But if we're being fair, every member of the media, every fan said that Joe Judge, once he got here, they felt had just as much, if not more, responsibility for the building of the roster than Dave Gettleman did. I think we can all agree with that, because that's all I heard. Whether it be from Dan Duggan, whether it be from Jordan Renan, that's all I heard. Anytime there was a good move, it was Joe Judge. Anytime there was a bad move, it was Dave Gettleman. That seemed to be the fan base's mindset. I was always of the mindset it was collaborative. Regardless, he had a lot of say in the personnel decisions. And this year, the biggest reason why I was out on Gettleman is the same reason I'm out on Joe Judge in terms of just his personnel decisions. Then I'll get into the real reason why he should have been fired. The neglect and them just ignoring the offensive line and then putting faith in guys like Shane Lemieux and putting faith in guys like Matt Barrett. And that gamble did not pay off. You could blame the injuries for Shane Lemieux. You can't blame the injuries for Matt Barrett, who couldn't even beat out Nate Solder. So that was a failure on Gettleman and Judge's part, whoever you want to put the blame on in terms of the roster building, to completely ignore the offensive line in this year's draft. As far as Joe Judge goes as a coach, like I said, not dealt a fair hand. And I'll even say this, had he come in with a new GM, I wouldn't have been calling for Joe Judge's head this year. I wouldn't have been. I would have been giving that GM and the head coach another year, and I would have said, okay, it's reasonable with the injuries, so on and so forth. Did Joe Judge do a lot of things that made you go crazy? Yeah. The QB sneak on 3rd and 8. The inability to show any confidence in his players, not just in that instance, but all year. 4th and 1 on the opponent's 32, several times where you said to yourself, show some confidence in your football team. Play to win, don't play to lose. And in today's NFL, it's tough to win when you have a head coach like that. Yes, I recognize that the team has limitations, but some of that has to do with him. He was part of the roster building over the last 2 years. Is it fair? No. But Joe Judge, to me, did not prove enough 2 years through his tenure with the New York Giants to earn a third when you were going to be bringing in a new GM. Were there some good things? Sure. Did the team put in him? I don't think so. Did he start to build a culture? Perhaps. I'm not in that locker room. Was he a good talker? Absolutely. Did he seem like he was a smart guy? Sure. But to me, he didn't show enough in terms of being able to put faith in him for a third year and being able to convince a really good GM to take this job and bring him back as the head coach. And even if the GM was willing to do that, then you're talking about bringing in an offensive coordinator that knows more than likely he's going to be looking for a job the next year. Because Joe Judge, going into next year, if you bring him back, is going to be a lame duck coach. If the Giants don't go out there and win 9 or 10 games, Joe's going to lose his job anyway. Because the fan base will demand change. And I think John Mara saw that, and he said that it's time to move on. But let's not get it twisted. Dave Gettleman deserves a lot more blame than that of Joe Judge. I think it's circumstantial as to why Joe Judge is getting a lot more of the venom, because it's almost like built in that we already knew Dave Gettleman was gone. Like it was a known fact. Dave Gettleman's gone. No matter what, he's gone. Once we started 0-3, 0-4, it was just inevitable. He's gone. He's going to retire at the end of the year. I'm not a fan that is going to cry that he wasn't fired. It is what it is. Move on. He's done. Let's bring in a new GM and let's start building this team the right way, because that's the way we should think right now as a fan base going forward. Dave Gettleman was horrible. Arguably the worst GM in the history of the New York Giants. It was that bad when you go back and look at it. And we could, I'll be the first to say I was guilty of some things. I tried to at least see the reasoning in terms of some of Dave Gettleman's moves, whether it be the Leonard Williams trade, which didn't make a whole lot of sense. Several moves that he made that I tried to find some reasoning in. Didn't make a whole lot of sense. Didn't love the Daniel Jones pick. Obviously, 2018 was a disaster. Completely ignoring the offensive line this year. Dave Gettleman told us from the start that he was going to fix this offensive line. He's leaving us with 4 backups and a very good starting left tackle. Not much better than what he inherited. He failed. He hasn't provided us so far with a franchise quarterback, hasn't provided us with any semblance of an offensive line, and all the pieces that he gave us on the defense, for the most part, outside of Xavier McKinney and maybe Azeez Ojulari, were free agents. Guys like James Bradbury, guys like Blake Martinez. Dexter Lawrence has been mediocre, certainly not worthy of that 17th overall selection. So we could talk about the blame game and live in the past forever and say, oh, Chris, you were wrong about Gettleman forever. It's time to turn the page. It's time to come together as a fan base, in my opinion, and say, okay, let's look towards the future. Let's be excited about the things that are to come. And I'm going to be the first to say, I'm going to give this GM and this head coach just as much of a time length that I would have given the previous GM and head coach, which was 3 years. I was willing to go forward with Shermer for another year in 2020. I'm going to go in with the same mindset. And some fans may not like hearing that. There's going to be some fans that are going to want the general manager and head coach fired after the first year if the team wins 3 or 4 games. I'm going to recognize they are inheriting a horrible situation. The same way that I recognize they inherited a horrible situation in 2018. And the Giants got off on the wrong foot. Don't get it twisted. I don't expect that to happen this time around. Reason being, well, there's not really much of an incentive to try to win. Like, how could you convince yourself that this could be a Super Bowl winning roster if you make a couple of moves here and there? So I think they're going to think long term. I think they're going to build this thing up the right way. Got to hit on your draft picks and got to get good, strong minds in here. But I think by firing Judge, it's going to allow them to get the best candidate they possibly can to take this job. Now, not everybody's going to want it. We don't know who's going to want to take this job, but I think the Giants' job is a little bit more attractive than some people may realize. You got 5 picks inside the top 85. You've got 2 picks inside the top 7, and really the freedom to do whatever the hell you want. I mean, when you look on this roster right now, who are the players that you're committed to for more than a year? Xavier McKinney, Andrew Thomas, Azeez Ojulari. That's about it. And I think you're going to be able to bring in whatever you want in terms of your coaching staff, your defensive coordinator. You don't have to you don't have to fit it to a scheme. So I think the coach will come in, and I think you'll be able to get a good head coach as long as you're bringing a good general manager. And hopefully they could start to build this thing up the right way. And I'm looking forward to the coaching search and the GM search. But I want to go to John Mara before we get into the quotes. A lot of people, myself included, have been very hard on John Mara, rightfully so. He's completely failed us. But I do think if you're being fair with yourself, you got to now give him a chance, being that he's done exactly what you've wanted as a fan base. He's blown this up. He got rid of the GM. He got rid of the head coach. Let him hire the GM first before you start to ridicule him about, not getting rid of all the scouts yet. Like, let that general manager make that decision. Do I think Chris Mara will stay on? Yeah, he's his brother. But as long as they make wholesale changes and make major changes, even though I may not love that, I can live with that. Just get rid of everybody else. Get rid of the scouts. Get rid of everybody. And let this general manager come in and do the job that he's supposed to. That's my take on the situation. But let's jump into some of the quotes from John Mara. This coming out from Jordan Renan. This was kind of an interpretation based off of what John Mara had to say. The one thing that does provide optimism is that John Mara all but admitted the last GM search was, shall I say, flawed. He used the word rushed. Giants seem intent on having a more extensive process this time around. We're going to try to not make the same mistake, he said, which is good. I mean, which is obvious they need to do, and that's obvious already. I mean, they're already bringing in 9 candidates. Last time around, they brought in 4. 2 of them were with the organization. 1 was formerly with the organization. The other was Louis Riddick. They brought in 9 candidates already, and all of them are going to be from outside the organization. So it seems like it's going to be a much more thorough search. Don't expect to get your answer tomorrow. It may take a week for them to hire their guy, but the most important thing, like he said, is that they get it right. So that's good stuff. Next thing from Dan Salamone. John Mara said the GM will lead the search for the head coach. In terms of Daniel Jones or Saquon or any other player, that will be between the general manager and the head coach. Now, you guys could guess that maybe it won't be. Maybe he's going to force Jones on them. I truly don't think that'll be the case. I think if John Mara wanted to keep Daniel Jones, he would have at least kept Joe Judge. Now, he may hope that they keep Daniel Jones, but that doesn't mean he's not going to give these guys full say. And if he doesn't give them full say, a lot of these guys he's bringing in aren't going to take this job. That's the way I look at it. Do you think Shane would take this job if Daniel Jones had to be his quarterback? No. And I think there's I would keep Daniel Jones. I've said it for 1 year, not long term. So I think there's a reasonable explanation if he decides to push forward with Daniel Jones, being that it's not the strongest quarterback draft class to begin with. But neither one of these players, if I'm being honest, do I expect to be in the long-term plans of this football team. Neither one was going to be drafted by the GM that's coming in. The team has struggled since they've drafted him, and it's going to cost you a lot of money to retain them, being that they're going to be ending on, coming up on the end of their rookie salary. So I don't see Daniel Jones or Saquon Barkley being here much longer than another year or two. This thing coming out from Dan Salamone as well. John Mara said he didn't see a clear way out in terms of the head coach and the general manager. They had to blow it all up and get a new head coach with a new GM. We need to start from the ground up again. And it's really only the second time they've started from the ground up. Like I said, Reese just kind of replaced the former GM, and then after Reese was retired, they blew it up once with Gettleman and Shermer, but it wasn't really a true rebuild. They tried to build off of what they already had with Eli Manning. Then they tried to blow it up in 2019. They tried to pivot, and it was just a complete disaster. Everything they tried to do, for the most part, blew up in their face. Where there are some moves here and there that worked out for Dave Gettleman, yeah. I'm not going to say he made all bad moves. I thought the 2020 offseason, for the most part, was actually a very good offseason. But outside of that, it was a complete failure. Then he went on to say this. John Mara said it won't be a package deal. This is an interesting tidbit. With the GM and the head coach. Meaning, say he hires Joe Shane, that doesn't necessarily mean that Brian Daboll's going to come along. They may hire a guy, and then they may hire somebody completely different. So maybe they bring in Joe Shane, and he decides to bring in Brian Flores. A lot of people are just thinking that if they hire Shane, he's going to bring Daboll. He's saying that is not the case. They want to take their time and be extensive. A mistake, he said, they made in the past. Then he went on to say this. John Mara said they need to earn back the fans' trust. That's not going to happen overnight. It starts with getting the GM and the head coach right. And there you go. And I mean, he's right. You're not going to just earn the fans' trust back. I will say I think the majority of fans are at least encouraged that this could be going down the right path, but they're going to need to see results before they could completely trust the process. I personally, as a fan, and I got to see what they do in the offseason, but my mindset going into 2022, I just want to see a direction. And some people, their definition of direction may be something completely different than mine. But I want to see something that is starting to grow. That's not necessarily indicated on the wins and losses. I'm going to go into next year realizing that they're starting from scratch. They're going to get rid of a lot of the players that they feel are dead weight on this football team and players that they don't think are going to be in the best long-term interest of the New York Giants. It'll be 2023 where I'll really start to expect serious results in terms of the wins, loss, in terms of growth. But going into next year, I just want to see direction, and I want to start to see it carried out. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to make this promise. They are getting 3 years from me. I don't care if the New York Giants struggle mightily in 2023. We have got to give a GM and head coach on the same time cycle a 3-year period, especially if we're going to draft another rookie quarterback in 2023. We cannot make the same mistake we did back in 2019 in 2023 when we fired Shermer, because I still say to this day, I think it was a mistake to fire a head coach that you hand-selected your quarterback, because then we saw what it did to Daniel Jones. Say what you want to say about Daniel Jones, and I don't think he's going to be here long-term for the Giants. The upbringing of Daniel Jones was a complete embarrassment, and it was mishandled by this organization every step of the way. The fact that Daniel Jones is going on year 4 and he's now going to have his 3rd head coach, the fact that Daniel Jones is going on year 4, he's going to have his 4th different play caller, and the fact that he's got 1 NFL offensive lineman and 4 backups is a complete embarrassment. The fact that he's had an offensive coordinator from the prehistoric era is a complete embarrassment. And what the New York Giants have done for him, they've done him no favors. That's just the fact of the matter. And you have to hope the next quarterback that comes in, if Daniel Jones is not going to be here long term, they build this team up the right way. And we need to see that happen starting this offseason when they have 5 picks inside the top 85. And then, and that's it. I thought I had another quote, but that's it. Merritt, to me, when I watched back the press conference, seemed like he was very honest. And, and I think he showed a lot of humility, and I really do truly believe in my heart as a fan that he is trying to do things the right way. He's trying to see the errors in his ways, and I do think this time around he will take a hands-off approach, and he will let this GM come in and do the job. What we have to hope as a fan base is he hires the correct GM, and he comes in here and starts to fix this team up real quick. But that remains to be seen. That's what next season will be about, and the process is going to be a lot of fun to cover. Like I said earlier, hopefully some of you guys come on over for the live stream on Twitter. But just wanted to kind of recap everything that just transpired over the last 48 hours. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.